Hey everyone, I'm the person who made the page. Okay, so we have a Michael Jordan fan. There was a guy on YouTube who wrote on one of the videos who goes by the YouTube username of Noah S. Seems like a nice guy. And he explained that, his dad is a Michael Jordan fan and that, he wanted to have his dad go on. So his dad is going to go on. He goes by the name of Matt. He's on right now, so let me just put him on. Hey, thank you for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You have Michael Jordan as number one. Feel free to explain why Michael Jordan is number one, if you like.
Well, we'll start with the obvious: 6 championships, 0 losses. I'm sure you hear that a lot. That's a huge one for me. We could go over stats, or my main contention, however, is that Jordan would have done better in Wilt's era than Wilt would have done in Jordan's era. That's really my main contention.
It's different things like the rings and stats, his awards and things like that.
Right. I have some. Whenever we can get into the stats, I have no problem with that. Again, my big one is 6-0 in finals. Jordan had more steals leaders. I don't know that they kept Wilt the stats for steals back in Wilt, to be honest with you, so I'm not sure how fair that is. Scoring leader, Jordan 10, Wilt 7. Defensive player of the year, Jordan 1, Wilt 0. There's quite a few.
Let's go with one of the things you explained, rings. One player doesn't win rings. It's a team. Why do true. Michael Jordan fans act like, one player wins rings? You say it's true, but that's one of your things about why Michael Jordan is number one.
Well, it's a tough one. But, Jordan, let's see. The teams that he always played with, everybody's going to say there was Scottie Pippen at least. If not, I believe Ron Harper, you have obviously Rodman at some points, but he won those games, some of those games without those guys. You know what I mean? Like, except for Pippen, I would say, 3 of those championships were won with Rodman? And does that sound right to you? I can't, off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to recall that.
He won 3 when Rodman was on there, 3 when Rodman was not on there. But, again,
right.
One player doesn't win rings, so even if he didn't have Rodman or he did, it's not Michael Jordan. So if the Bulls score 100 points and Michael Jordan scores, 29, that's not one player winning the rings. And you can point to lots of stars.
But did they win those?
Who won rings with? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, I was just going to say, do they win those rings without Jordan?
Well, couldn't you point to other stars in the NBA who teams may not win without their star or stars?
Well, of course. That's like you look at Kobe and Shaq. When Shaq left, Kobe was Kobe. But there's. I understand your point. I do, but also to be 6-0 in the finals. It's just to get that far. They don't do it without Jordan. There's no way they make 6 finals and win all of them without Jordan. So as far as you saying, you can't. It's a team effort. It's a team effort. I agree with you to an extent, but also if you remove Jordan from that equation, there is no 6-0. There is no 6 finals.
Well, but again, you can point to other teams who may not win without their star or stars.
Right. Fair enough.
You say fair enough, but then you go back to Jordan as number one. You use that as criteria as why Jordan is number one. Can't have it both ways. If you disagree, well, that's fine too. But which one is it? Do you agree that it's a team, or is it like, no, it's because of Mike?
No, but it is because of Mike. That's why you can't have it both ways. But kind of in some cases you can. Obviously, to use another example. I hate to keep going back to Shaq and Kobe, but it's a good example. When they were together, I can't recall the number of titles off the top of my head. Was it 3, I think, together with them?
Yeah, they won 3 titles, right.
Okay, and then as soon as Shaq left town, Kobe, till he got Pau Gasol, was nothing. So I think you could remove Scottie Pippen from the Jordan equation, and Jordan still would have won titles. I just do.
But that doesn't make any sense, man. You can remove Pippen from them, and Jordan did not win in the 80s.
That's true.
And he lost.
But he was also young back then too. It wasn't like Wilt came into the league.
Okay, but now you're moving. But do you know what you're doing here? This is what a lot of Jordan fans do. You guys move the goalpost. So every time there's a thing about there's a contradiction or something that's not factual, it's but he was older in Washington. But in 1995 he didn't have enough time. But at the time he was young in the 80s. But Pippen was out in Game 7. There's always a but. Which is fine. But then the thing is, when you do the but routine, then the consistency is not the same for other stars. What about when other stars are older or needed more practice or didn't have a star? You guys are not as consistent with other stars. Well, if you're going to have opinions of
name
Mike...
another star we're talking about.
Well, I mean, I can do that, no, I can do that, but can I ask you just before I do that, when you ask me what examples, you really don't think, just by common sense and from what you know about the NBA, there has never been another situation like those other than Michael Jordan in general?
With 6 titles? I don't know. I mean, it's tough to say.
No, not the 6 titles. The other examples we were going over about when stars are older, stars may need more practice, stars may be young and inexperienced, or whatever those details were.
I'm sure that happens. I mean, it'd be naive of me to say no. There's not. I mean, but again, those other players didn't end up putting up the stats Jordan did at the end of their careers either. You know what I mean? Like, I get what you're saying. Like, it's making excuses for the beginning of his career, but at the same time, everybody's got growing pains. I mean, nobody's coming in. I can't think of one person who came in the league and.
Well, hold on. It's not just making excuses. There's 2 things here. First, these are kind of uneducated opinions to have about Michael Jordan, but it's not just that. It's not consistent. You know, when you have an opinion on something, you should be fair and consistent in other areas. But when you do it with Mike, you don't do this with other stars. If you do, you wouldn't just conclude, well, Mike is number one because, hey, he had the stats, he didn't have Scottie Pippen, hey, he was young and experienced. All these things. Are you being fair with other stars? If you are, then why does Mike get elevated to number one? What about the other stars?
Well, give me an example. Like, who would we be speaking about?
Well, I mean,
I'll give you a reasoning behind it.
Oh, sure. But we can do that. But then I don't want to skip past your point. Your point was about Mike. Hey, Mike, the Bulls may not have won without Mike. Well, lots of other teams may not have won without their star. Well, the Bulls, Michael Jordan was young and inexperienced. That was your point, right? So
yes.
Other stars were young and inexperienced. Michael Jordan had lots of good stats. Well, other stars have lots of good stats. Michael Jordan, if you're going by the totality of everything from Michael Jordan, his awards, his achievements, other stars have good totality of awards and achievements.
Sure, but do any of them have 6-0 in finals on top of all those other stats? I'm trying to think of someone off the top of my head here quick. Look, Patrick Ewing comes to mind. I mean, he had a great career. He had a good supporting cast in the 90s. I mean, he had, Starks, the Oakley, and some, I can't, off the top of my head come up with the others, but they never were able to get there. You know what I mean? And one of the main reasons they were never able to get there is the Bulls and Jordan. There's plenty of superstars who have great stats, but they don't have the 6-0 in the finals. They don't have the 6 finals MVPs. You know what I mean? Like, those are the ones that put someone over the top, in my opinion. Like, those other stars were great, but they just weren't Jordan great. Okay, so now we're going in a circle here. So I thought we acknowledged one player doesn't win rings. I thought you knew that one player doesn't win rings. So, yes. And then also when you asked, are there other stars who have 6 rings? Yes, there are other stars who have 6 rings or more. With 0 losses? I'm not saying there's not other stars who have these things. I mean, I'm not trying to debate that at all. I'm just saying when you add it all up, like Tim Duncan, one of the greatest players of all time. I honestly, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head without looking it up how many rings he had. He had other great players on his team. You know what I mean? Like, so anybody who's won a championship has other great players. I mean, I can see that. But at the same time, those great players didn't put up the same numbers as Jordan did. Tim Duncan doesn't have the same credentials that Jordan has. Great player, not best of all time. So for example, when Wilt Chamberlain is getting 40 points and 20 rebounds, how is he supposed to put up those numbers in the finals if his team is not in the finals? Well, I mean, you got me there. I mean, what can I say? But at the same time, I will contend that Wilt Chamberlain didn't play against the same level of competition that Michael Jordan played against. Okay, no problem. You don't like Wilt Chamberlain as an example, fine. So how is Larry Bird supposed to put up great numbers if his team is not in the finals? Larry Bird had great teams, though. I mean, they were in the finals. But they didn't always go to the finals. They didn't always go to the finals, not every year. They didn't. You're right, and neither did the Bulls, to be fair. Larry Bird's one of my favorite all-time players also, but I wouldn't put him over Jordan. I just wouldn't. But Bird had great teams around him. Parrish, McHale, like those were great players around him. And as you acknowledged, so did Michael Jordan. But he couldn't do what Jordan did with the same amount of great players. You see where my argument is there? But how do you measure? Like, there's a few holes in this. Look, first of all, you can't hold it against a star for what team he has. If he gets drafted into a team, what do you expect him to do? Not play or tell the manager, get this guy, and then the manager gets him, and then Michael Jordan fans will say, look, they're putting together a super team. They're getting all the players together. So no matter what a star does, you guys
I don't know about you personally, but I mean generally,
right.
You guys will hold it against the star. If the star is on a losing team, hey, look, that star couldn't win. If he gets buddies together to make a super team, oh, yeah, he put a super team together. It's a lose-lose situation for you guys. And then the other thing is, again, one player doesn't win rings. It's a team. I thought you acknowledged this, but then you go back to, well, Mike has 6 rings. Mike's undefeated.
I agree with you, but I don't know how to explain it any better. I agree, but I also disagree because, yeah, it is a team, but if you don't, like, none of my Sixers teams from the early 90s could win a championship. You know, it just wasn't going to happen. But you, even if you put Jordan on those teams, I can see that there's the likelihood of them getting there is less. But all these other teams, all these other stars you're mentioning, Bird, Chamberlain, except Chamberlain, I'll clarify that, they had the players around them. So it's not like it was just Jordan who had these, great helping players.
Some players have wonderful teams, and some have teams that are not going to win a ring. That's the point. When you explain that they had people, well, number one, Michael Jordan had people also, and number two, having some people doesn't mean you're going to win a ring. You need a team to win a ring. As you guys have pointed out, again, I'm not saying it's you, but Michael Jordan fans have done this. When Scottie Pippen was gone for that Game 7, you're making the point he did not have help. That is your own. That's your point, that they don't have enough. But now it works both ways. Just because you have help or don't have help doesn't mean you're going to win a ring. And other stars, sometimes they had the help and the team wasn't good enough, or they didn't have the help then. And you know that, you say right, but then you go back to, well, I agree and I disagree. Michael Jordan had and Michael Jordan didn't have.
But I'm saying, I wish I could explain this more clearly, or at least try to. I'm not getting the point across, I guess. Larry Bird had Parrish, Larry Bird had McHale, and some years they didn't even make the finals. Some years they did. So I mean, that's going to happen. But when you get to the finals, when you reach that point, to go 6-0 and to never have lost a finals match and to be MVP 6 times, like, tell me another star that did that.
I'll do that, by the way, or something similar. But before I do, when you say, other stars didn't do that, do what? Go to the finals and win. That's not a star who does this. This is not tennis or golf or wrestling, or it's one player. To get to the finals, and to win in the finals, you need a team. So you say you get that, and it's a team sport, but then you go back to isolating it like, hey, it's the finals, and he's undefeated. So you can have it both ways. Is it a team sport or not?
It is, but if you take those Bulls teams and remove Jordan, did they even make the finals?
Okay, but now we've addressed that. So when you take off other stars, do they win? Are they going to win as much? Maybe, maybe not.
Right. So, what I'm saying is, I don't know. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. I mean, I understand your point, and I guess I'm probably not your typical Jordan fan, as I'm not as overreactive about it. But with the finals thing, I understand if you remove some of the star players from other teams, that then those guys might not get to the finals. I get your point, but what I wish I could make this a better point. I wish I knew how to make it better. Was if you remove Jordan, like that's a different caliber of removing.
You brought up about removing Michael Jordan. What happens if you remove Magic Johnson, Larry Bird?
As far as Bird and all that go, it's the same thing. I mean, I agree with you to an extent. I do. But at the same time, if you put, let's say if it were possible, and that's what makes these debates really hard, is it's all hypothetical. It really is. But let's say we hypothetically could put Bird on the 90s Bulls that had the 6-0 in the finals. Could they be 6-0 with Bird instead of Jordan?
That's a really good question. As you mentioned, there's no way to prove it. I have no reason to believe that Larry Bird wouldn't have a chance to do as well as Jordan. Would he get 6 rings, less, the same, more? We're not going to know. But I have no reason to think that Larry Legend, on a triangle system with the same Bulls teams, when the offense is going to be around him, and he's also not just a scorer, he's also an all-around player who passes and does other things. I have no reason to doubt that Larry Bird doesn't have a chance, just a chance to do just as well as Mike or better than Mike. But you don't even have to use Larry Bird as an example. Why don't you put in someone who's similar to Mike, like a Kobe Bryant? If Kobe Bryant was on those Bulls teams with the same player, the same Phil Jackson, same triangle, wouldn't there be a chance for Kobe to win 6 or more rings? If he was
owning that same triangle.
Take out Mike and replace him with Kobe. He would have you if you were fair and educated about the NBA. You'd have to acknowledge that he would have a similar chance to win 6 or more rings. If you don't like Kobe as an example, we could do other players. Put in Magic Johnson. Put in Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain would be wonderful for a triangle. For a triangle? Okay. Okay, so you're going to do that arrow thing. So let's forget Wilt Chamberlain. Let's put in, because you're going to do the arrow thing. So how about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?
I can't help
Here's a guy. No, but that's a different topic. We'll get into some other time if you want. But Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a big guy in the middle who's going to straight dominate in the post. If he was in a triangle system with the Bulls, he could have a chance to win 6 or more rings. If you don't like Kareem, how about Shaq? Take out Michael Jordan and put in Shaq. There's no reason to believe Shaq wouldn't have a chance.
I disagree. I don't think. Well, Shaq is a different beast. I'll concede the Shaq point. I won't give you Kareem though, because I don't think Kareem going up against Patrick Ewing and Olajuwon and Mutombo and all those guys in their prime.
You're going to downplay Kareem. You're going to downplay Kareem.
I am going to I'm going to downplay Kareem. I mean, I've seen '80s basketball. I was a little young. I was born in '77, so you know, I remember the finals.
So you saw Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at 36 years old, still doing well. Imagine what he was like at 26.
Yeah, that's a fair point, but I don't think that without a guard, especially in '90s era basketball, a shooting guard was you needed one. I mean, it was a center dominated sport, but you needed
when you say shooting, remember the triangle can be based on any player. The triangle does well when you have one dominant star, and then of course you have a second one and a good team that's built around the star. So you don't have to be a shooting guard like Michael Jordan, but that's not the point. I don't want to get focused on is it Kareem will do well or not, even though I think it's strange that you would downplay Kareem, but fine. Don't focus on just Kareem.
My son would probably kill
You're not going with Larry Bird. You're not going with Kobe Bryant. You're going to downplay Wilt Chamberlain. You're going to downplay Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Basically what you're doing is everyone's wrong, everyone's not good, everyone's not good enough, every era sucks, Michael Jordan, Michael Jordan, Michael Jordan.
No, I get why you think that, and I understand you deal with these crazy Jordan fans, and I hope I don't come across as that kind of Jordan fan.
Not
Maybe
at all.
I do.
Not at all.
That's terrible.
You don't. No, you don't. You don't.
But
you don't. But I was surprised that you're doing a pattern here. You don't want to put in Larry Bird. You don't want to put in Kareem.
No.
You don't want to put in Wilt. What I mean is you don't think they'd win enough. So you are downplaying 3 legendary players, people who some think are the greatest of all time. And if you're just going to say, you know what, not Larry, not Wilt, not Kareem, and even Shaq, you were hesitant, but then you changed on that. Aren't you kind of doing the Michael Jordan fan routine when you're just downplaying other stars, eras, and stuff like that?
Sadly, I guess I kind of am, which makes me sort of sick to my stomach. But at the same time, I just, like Larry Bird, that's a tough one I may have to concede to, because he's definitely one of my all-time favorite players. I mean, the way he could shoot the ball and stuff, he might have done. But I don't think a center, I mean, outside of Shaq, and I know you mentioned Wilt and Kareem, but I just don't think a center, I don't know. I mean, I know the 90s was a big center era, but I just don't think either of those guys do 6-0 in the finals. I just don't see that happening.
No, so no one knows what's going to happen. There's no way you and I will know for sure. We just have to use common sense. If you had the same Bulls team, the same coach, the same triangle, and you just take out Jordan, pop in another player who can dominate with points, there's no reason to think that star wouldn't have a chance to do it just as well or better than Jordan.
Oh, they have a chance. And I don't think they do better than. They'd have a chance to do maybe as well, but I just don't even see that happening. And again, you may be right. There may be some Jordan bias on my part there, but I grew up in '90s era basketball, so it's hard to. Like people say, if you're familiar with baseball at all, people always, Babe Ruth. You hear that all the time. Babe Ruth was the best baseball player ever, and I don't know. I mean, could you put him in today's baseball leagues, and would you get? It's all.
You're going to downplay Babe Ruth.
I am going to downplay. Babe Ruth was in an era where they came in after the game and was like, "How many home runs do you have today, Babe?" I don't know, 7, and they wrote that down. You know what I mean? Like So if
you're going to downplay, if you're going to downplay Babe Ruth, I'm assuming you're going to downplay all other guys like Ty Cobb.
No. Well, Ty Cobb. I mean, how would they do in today's baseball? It's a different sport. I mean, guys weren't throwing 100 miles an hour every pitch, but we're getting off on baseball here too. I'm sure that's probably not what you want to do.
I've never known a baseball fan to downplay Babe Ruth. But this is something that basketball fans do where they downplay. Like basketball fans are the only fans in general who downplay their past stars. Usually baseball, boxing, football, tennis, they don't do this. You're downplaying Babe Ruth?
I'm downplaying Babe Ruth. I am. I'm sure I'll take heat for that. But the stat tracking was awful back then. The team, like it was like the Yankees were the greatest team on earth at the time, and their opponents were nobodies for the most part. It just.
Well, I mean, you say they're nobodies. You have no reason to believe they're nobodies. Come on, man. I mean, you can make the same point. What about today's game? The ball is stitched up. They're saying it's tighter. Is it juiced the last few years? Steroids. You can find knocks on today's game too.
No, the steroid era was a joke. Unfortunately, I agree with that. I mean, the numbers were inflated. Like Barry Bonds happened to be, when I was a kid, my favorite player. But then when the whole steroid thing came about, like I don't consider Barry Bonds to be the home run leader at all in any way, shape, or form. I mean, that's cheating in my opinion. But what can I do about it?
When you find things about past generations, not only are you being disrespectful to past generations, and I apologize, but we got to be honest, you're being a little uneducated about the past generations because of the things that they had and didn't have. It works both ways. If you're going to find things about past generations, you can find things about today's generation. So when I was giving the examples of what's happening today, I'm not explaining like, oh, today's generation isn't that good, they wouldn't do wonderful. I'm just explaining to be consistent and fair. If you find stuff about the past, couldn't you find stuff about today? And then also, there's a flip side to that. When you find things about the past, what about the flip side, which is what they had to go through? So, for example, they didn't have the same money, the same equipment, the same fame. They had to deal with things like racism. It works both ways. There's a flip side.
No, I agree. I do. I understand. Like there was, they didn't back then. In Babe Ruth's time, they had to take train rides. There wasn't private planes. There's certainly a lot. The training equipment, just training regimens in general were completely not what they are today. Technology has certainly aided that a lot, but I don't know. I mean, I understand your point, and I really catching myself coming across very biased now, and I feel bad about it. But it's just it's an opinion I've held since I was a kid. I loved baseball as a kid, but I've kind of grown out of the sport. To be honest with you, I couldn't even tell you anything about the current state of baseball, but I just you to bring it back to basketball, you look at 90s era basketball with the hand checking. How, would Steph Curry be able to handle the hand check? Would Steph Curry still be as dominant in 90s era basketball, which, again, being biased here for sure, was, I think, the predominant era of basketball?
Oh, why do you think it was a predominant? How do you know this?
That's an opinion. I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. That's an opinion. I don't know that. I obviously did grow up. I wasn't alive when Wilt was doing his thing. I wasn't alive when Jerry West was doing his thing. But you already determined that era with Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West wasn't that good. And they wouldn't do as well today. So when you say you weren't alive back then, you already determined it. Well, they didn't have the competition. I mean, you people will give me the Bill Russell argument, like, oh yeah, well he had 11 rings. Yeah, but who did he play against other than Wilt Chamberlain? Like who did he play against?
But that's a silly argument for just so many. I don't even know if we have enough time. Just to give you an idea, because there's not enough time left in the program. It's about 10. Just to give you an idea. First of all, you can't fault a player for what his time is. You can't. What is he supposed to do? Is he supposed to say, "Oh, I'm not going to even play," because even if I play, the future is going to downplay me and say I suck anyway because I'm not that good and the era is not that good. So just like I explained earlier with whatever the other topic was, it's a lose-lose situation with you guys, because if he does well, you know what, the era sucked and he wasn't that good. And if he doesn't do well, look, he didn't win. He doesn't have the rings anyway. So it's a lose-lose situation. And then the other thing is, remember, there's a lot of details. There's just not enough time. But the other thing is, what about the fact that there are other things that made it harder for them? So they're playing 4 games nights in a row. They're dealing with prejudice from people. They're not getting the same money. They don't have the same equipment. You're not being fair. You're not being 100%. And like when you point the finger, point it everywhere.
Well, I agree. There's definitely different sets of challenges, but in today's world, and it's like, this is going to sound coddled for these players, and I apologize, but it's true. Like, Wilt Chamberlain didn't have to deal with social media. You know what I mean? He didn't have to worry about everything he said or did being scrutinized to the level it was today. So there's absolutely complications for the players in every era, and I don't disagree with that. But at the same time, I just don't see the level of talent being the same in that era of basketball as it was.
But how do you know this? As you pointed out, you pointed out earlier that you weren't there or you don't know. But then, if you don't know, how do you conclude that it wasn't good?
Well, I mean, name me some players. You know what I mean? Like, I can't give you a list of great players in Wilt's era. I mean, outside of Bill Russell, Pettit, and yeah, I'd have to do some research to be completely honest with you.
But now you're putting yourself in a bigger box. So if you don't know the players, how do you know he didn't have that good competition then?
Well, it's not that I'm just saying as far as the great players back then. I don't have off the top of my head. I'm not saying there weren't great players back then, but there were less of them back then. Is my point.
Oh, you would think actually there'd be more good players because when you have less teams, think of it like this. Imagine the era that you think is so amazing, the 90s, all right? So imagine you took out half the teams. Take out half the teams in the 90s, okay? Just take out half. Now all the stars have to go on whatever teams are left. You're going to have better teams in the 90s because a lot of players are gone, a lot of teams are gone, so they have to fit whatever roster spots are left with the best of the best. So you're going to have better teams. So when you have a generation that has when a generation has less teams, only certain players are going to make those spots. The more teams you have, the more players go on. A lot of people in the 90s, this is not my opinion, a lot of NBA Hall of Famers and NBA experts thought that the 90s was watered down and hurt by expansion. There were lots of people who said, you know what, NBA stars today, all they do is dunk and crossover and want to make money. They don't have good fundamentals. This is what NBA fans in general, but they did that in the 90s. They were a lot of stars, NBA Hall of Famers and experts were explaining that Michael Jordan is only winning because all the other stars left, and the rules they're making it easy for Mike. David Stern, the refs are protecting Mike. It's a lot easier, and they felt like the reason he won 72 games and won so many rings is because the quality of the NBA wasn't as good as the past NBA.
That's a tough argument, and again, I'm admitting to. I'm probably being very biased here because again, that was my that's when I got into basketball. That's why I watched that '90s basketball faithfully, and I agree. There's definitely going to be things like that from every generation. Like I've heard the stories about Michael where the referee once told another referee, I can't remember the names of the referees, but they said, if how do you know if he was fouled? Well, he didn't make the shot. You know what I mean? Like they definitely gave Jordan some calls. I'm not going to disagree with that, but I think that happens to all superstars. I mean, LeBron gets some calls, Curry gets some calls. Hold on. Harden gets some calls.
It probably does, but the NBA particularly got worse as time passed, where they protect their stars, and certain stars will get a pass. In baseball, they will throw anybody out. They'll call a third strike on anyone. Babe Ruth stole the base in Game 7 or whatever, the World Series, whatever. They called him out. They will call a third strike on everyone. In basketball, it's different. What do they teach in basketball? You know what? Shoot to win on the road, because you never know, you might not get a call for the refs. And stars don't always get. How many times does a star get a sixth foul and fouls out? It happens, but not as much as other stars. And we know it doesn't happen like Michael Jordan's going to foul out, right? It doesn't happen that much.
It's rare.
And then like when there's a rookie near you and there's a foul, the rookie raises his hand and the ref's like, oh, we'll give it to the rookie, right? And there's this whole thing in basketball about there's this whole thing in basketball about, hey, what do we do with the stars fouling out? Because people are paying lots of money to come to the audience, and they want the stars to be there. There's a thing about the NBA where they protect stars, they give a pass to stars, and when it's not just any star, it's a Michael Jordan, there's going to be a difference. And when you explained about the rules, there was a difference in how they enforce rules in the 90s and other times compared to the past. In the past, they enforced traveling, palming, carrying, double dribbling. In other years, including when Mike played, they do not enforce traveling, palming, carrying, and double dribbling.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I mean, I'll concede that point because, I mean, you look at today's NBA, James Harden travels every time he takes a shot. It's ridiculous. I do agree with that. They've definitely laxed in those rules, and I can't argue that point. I mean, you got me there. I won't even try.
Hey, please subscribe, and if you disagree with me on something, you can go on my program and show me your facts on whatever you disagree on. If you want to go on, let's set it up. Send me an email. The email is right there in the description section. Thank you.